Hey everybody, hope the distance learning is going well. And we're going to talk today about probably the most famous formula or theorem in all of math, and that's the Pythagorean Theorem. This is one that most people actually remember outside of high school, maybe the only one a lot of people remember. And if it doesn't jump to mind by name, probably by formula it will. The Pythagorean Theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Probably the most memorable, easy one to remember here. Just remember, you know that it only applies to right triangles, meaning triangles that have a right angle in it, and that's what this little box always represents. You'll be taking more, geometry next year, and you'll master a lot of little properties, but this is one you probably should be aware of. So it's an easy formula to remember, easy formula to use. But just make sure you use it right. And the important thing is this. C, whatever is C, represents the hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is always the side that is across from the right angle. That is always the longest side of a right triangle also. And the other two sides, the two sides that form that right angle, are just called legs. Sometimes they're the same length, sometimes they're longer than each other, but there's two legs and one hypotenuse. And so the two legs, it doesn't matter which one you call A or B, because you're going to add them together after you square them anyway. In addition, the order doesn't matter. But the hypotenuse, the longest side, the special side, that's the one that goes by itself. So that's just the thing to keep in mind with the formula. And after that, it's really a very easy formula to use. You probably did it a little bit in middle school, so we're just going to do a little review here. 2 quick problems. So we're going to find each variable, and if necessary, round to the nearest tenth. So we've got 3 sides on a right triangle. One of them is unknown. This is the right angle. That makes this side across from it the hypotenuse. And so that is the c in the a squared plus b squared equals c squared. The other 2 sides are x and 15. It doesn't matter which one you call a or b. So x squared plus b is 15 in this case, as I'm calling it. 15 squared is equal to c squared. So x squared, now solving with this, just take your time. You're just solving an equation here. You can use your calculator if you don't know these numbers. Sometimes you can get some pretty big numbers here. 15 squared is 225. 17 squared is 289. Now you're trying to solve for x, so the easiest way is, of course, to subtract 225 from each side, and then you'll be left with x squared equals 64. And now, you could actually solve this with factoring like we've been doing. Bring it over to one side and factor it. It'll be a difference of 2 squares. But really the fastest way that you want to do when it's set up like this is taking the square root of both sides. So if x squared is 64, then x would be the square root of 64. And we did talk earlier this year in terms of when you take the square root, technically there are 2 solutions, the positive and the negative square root of 64. And that would be plus or minus 8. 8 squared gives you 64, but so does negative 8 squared gives you 64. But in geometry, you're talking about the side of a triangle here. That side has to be positive. So x is only positive 8. And so if you sort of neglect the plus or minus bit here, you'll be just fine and only give the positive answer. But since this is algebra class, I do like to just mention that at least, that technically plus or minus is the solution to this equation, but only the positive is the realistic answer. Okay. So that one worked out nicely. 64 was a perfect square. So we got a nice integer answer. This one right here, which one is the hypotenuse? Just be careful, identify that. Here's the right angle. Across from the right angle is that side. That's the hypotenuse. And so the other 2 sides are a and b. So 10 squared plus 16 squared is equal to x squared, the side we don't know. And so in this case, when the hypotenuse is what you're finding, everything's already set up for you here, where these two are on the same side of the equation. 10 squared is 100, 16 squared is 256. Combine those. 100 plus 256 is 356. That's x squared. To solve, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. I'm going to ignore the plus or minus because I know it's only the positive answer I'm looking for. And 356, I don't know that off the top of my head. So I'll just take the square root on my calculator. Square root 356. And notice 356 is not a perfect square, so we get this decimal answer. This is an irrational answer. So we're going to round to the nearest tenth. And so x would be approximately, that's 18.86, so that 6 bumps that up to 18.9. Okay, notice it's the largest side of the triangle, 18.9. And there you go, 2 easy examples with the Pythagorean theorem. Good luck with your homework tonight. Show all your work and ask if you got any questions. Hang in there, everybody.